use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. A pleasant day to one and all. We are Group 1 and ready to fill your minds with new knowledge and lessons about today's discussion. My name is Shikaina Natividad and the following are my group mates: Mary Jane Akpal, Princess Bucaneg, Crystal Joy Faustino, Kyril Kate Ranay, Jordan Sugitan, and Angelica Lorenzo. For today's agenda, we were about to discuss the Basel Convention and the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and their disposal. Every year, a large amount of dangerous waste moves between countries. Waste come from a variety of sources, including wide range of manufacturing processes, medical care in hospitals, and household garbages. As the world develops and societies become larger with affluent consumption patterns, a variety of industrial, commercial, construction, agricultural, medical, and even domestic activities and waste, including hazardous waste, increases. Hazardous waste are the type of waste that can harm human health and the environment as well. These are also byproducts that are explosive, flammable, radioactive, prone to spontaneous combustion, emit flammable gases when in contact with water, poisonous, infectious, corrosive, toxic, and capable of producing another harmful substance after disposal are included. To solve this, an international agreement was opened and adopted. This is the Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movements of Hazardous Waste and their Disposals. The Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movements of Hazardous Waste and their Disposal is usually known as the Basel Convention. It is an international treaty and the most comprehensive global environmental agreement that was designed to reduce the movements of hazardous waste between nations and specifically to prevent the transfer of hazardous waste from developed to less developed countries. However, it does not address the transport of radioactive waste. This convention was adopted and was opened on May 22, 1989 and came into force on 1992. With 187 parties and it has nearly universal membership, the convention is also intended to reduce the rate and toxicity of waste generation to ensure environmentally sound waste management as close source of generation as possible. Now, let's proceed with the objectives and central goal of the Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movements of Hazardous Waste and their Disposals. Number 1, to reduce the boundary movements of hazardous waste to a minimum consistent with their environmentally sound management. Number 2, to dispose hazardous waste as close as possible to their source of income. Number 3, to minimize the generation of hazardous waste in terms of quantity and hazardousness. These are the most well-known objectives of the Basel Convention. Often, people believe that the Basel Convention is limited to the first objective only. But, in addition, the Basel Convention not only focuses on transboundary movements but stipulates the importance of dealing with the problem as close as possible to the source. And now, we are on the central goal of this convention. The central goal of this convention is environmentally sound management, or the ESM, the aim of which is to protect human health and the environment by minimizing hazardous waste production whenever possible. ESM means addressing the issue through an integrated life cycle approach, which involves strong controls from the generation of a hazardous waste to its storage, transport, treatment, reuse, recycling, recovery, and final disposal. Many companies have already demonstrated that cleaner production methods which eliminate or reduce hazardous output can be both economically and environmentally efficient. The United Nations Environment Programs or UNEP, Division on Technology, Industry, and Economics work to identify and disseminate best practices. In the coming decade, more emphasis will be placed on creating partnerships with industry and research institutions to create innovative approaches to ESM. One of the most critical aspects of ESM is lowering demands for products and services that result in hazardous byproducts. Consumers need to educate themselves as to the methods used in the production processes and think about what they buy every day.
For the history or historical backdrop of the Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movements of Hazardous Waste and Their Disposal, Ms. Mary Jane Akpal will discuss it to us.
The convention was brought about by two different events. First is the discharge of garbage in the Chian Sea. In this instance, a ship transporting incinerator ash from the city of Philadelphia in the United States dumped half of its cargo on a beach in Haiti before being compelled to leave. The predominance of the United States is evident here, with Haiti being the least developed nation. And the second case was in 1988 cocoa case, in which 5 ships transported 8,000 barrels of hazardous waste from Italy to the small town of Coco in Nigeria. Irony is that this company transports hazardous garbage out of Italy. They rented a piece of land from a farmer in Nigeria for $100 per month in exchange for permission to dump waste from Italy to his property. Therefore, a modest $100 can be used to purchase lands in developing nations where hazardous waste can be dumped because those nations are poor and would accept any type of financial advantage. This convention was modified to regulate the transport of hazardous waste from developed to developing countries. Because of this practice, which has been dubbed toxic colonialism by a number of well-known model activists, because toxic waste is transported from one country to colonial or new colonial nations. The historical backdrop on how the Basel Convention came into being was very interesting. The management of hazardous waste was included as one of the 3 priority areas in the United Nations Environment Policy's first Montevideo program in 1981. The Basel negotiation process started at 1987 and lasted until 1989. In order to help states create and implement their national policies on hazardous waste, the Cairo Guidelines were endorsed by the UNEP's Governing Council in June 1987. The final draft of the International Convention on the Control of Transboundary Transport of Hazardous Waste was presented to the Conference of Plenipotentiaries on March 20 to 22, 1989 in Basel, Switzerland, at the invitation of the Swiss government. 116 nations were represented.
For the scope of the Basel Convention, Mr. Sugitan will take the part.
Scope of Basel Convention. Number 1. The following waste that are subject to transboundary movement shall be hazardous waste for the purpose of the convention. Letter A. Waste that belong to any category contained in Annex 1 unless they do not possess any characteristics contained in Annex 3. And letter B. Waste that are covered under paragraph A but are defined as or are considered to be hazardous waste by the domestic legislation party of export, import, or transit. From the word itself, hazardous, the following waste should contain properties or substances that makes it harmful or dangerous to fit the purpose of the convention. Number 2. Waste that belong to any category contained in Annex 2 that are subject to transboundary movement shall be other waste for the purpose of the convention. To be specific, Waste under Annex 2 shall be other waste possessing any of the characteristics contained by hazardous waste to withstand the purpose of the convention.
For the explanation of waste categorization in the Basel Convention on the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and their disposal, and examples of waste regulated by the Basel Convention, Ms. Kyril Kitranay will take the part.
Categorization of waste, an example of waste regulated in the Basel Conventions. Let's start with the categorization of waste. When we say waste, these are the things that are no longer useful for us. I will present here 3 categorization of waste. First is the Annex 1 or the controlled waste. Example of these are the clinical waste and paint dyes. Second, Annex 2 are the household waste. Ito yung mga basura natin sa bahay. Example of these are the food waste, paper glass, metals, plastic, and textiles. And the third one is the hazardous waste. Under the hazardous waste are the explosive and organic, peroxide, poisonous, infectious substance, flammable, corrosive, and toxic. Now we are done with the categorization of waste in Basel Conventions. What are the 3 categories again? Okay, very good. These are the controlled waste, household waste, and hazardous waste. Now let's move on to the example of waste regulated in the Basel Conventions. These are the biomedicals and healthcare waste, used oil, used lead acid batteries, POP, polychlorinated biphenyls, and all chemicals generated in the industries. To sum it up, no matter how safe or dangerous waste is, as a visitor of the earth, we must know the proper way of disposing waste.
For this part, Ms. Angelica Lorenzo, take it away.
How the Basel Convention works. The Basel Convention regulates the transboundary movements of hazardous waste and other waste and obliges its parties to ensure that such wastes are managed and disposed of in an environmentally sound manner. The convention covers toxic, poisonous, explosive, corrosive, flammable, ecotoxic, and infectious waste. Parties also have an obligation to minimize the quantities that are transported to treat and dispose of waste as close as possible to their place of generation and to prevent or minimize the generation of waste at source. The convention also provides for the establishment of regional or sub-regional centers for training and technology transfers regarding the management of hazardous waste and other waste.
For the Basel Ban Amendment, Ms. Princess Bukanek.
So the Basel Ban Amendment is legally binding agreement to amend the Basel Convention with a new preamble paragraph, a new article, and a new annex. The effect of this addition is to prohibit countries listed on the Annex D7, which includes the member states of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the European Union, and the Liechtenstein from exporting hazardous waste as defined by the Convention to any transit or importing country not on the Annex D7. The ban amendment will be legally binding. The amendment is open to ratification by any Basel party. So next, I will be discuss to you the history of ban amendment. In March of 1989, the Basel Convention was created in the Basel, Switzerland as a global response to the learning increase in toxic waste which became epidemic in late 1980s. The new treaty sought to address this new scourge head-on as developing nations across the globe called for this new toxic colonialism to be banned outright. Unfortunately, due to the consensus basis used in the formation of international law, the new Basel Convention gabbled into adoption in Basel ended up doing far less than that. As rich countries like the United States and Japan formed the lowest common denominator and vetoed any notion of trade ban to dismay the developing countries. So next, in the following years from 1989 to 1992, to the credit of the developing countries around the world, they did not give up, but in fact, took the lead from Africa in the first adopting regional waste trade ban. One would have thought that the debate was over, but this was far from the case. The Juscans group at that point began a protracted war against the prohibition of hazardous waste exports from developed to developing countries. Immediately following the meeting, they declared that the decision of the convention is not legally binding. At that critical juncture, Switzerland and Indonesia came to the rescue. They launched the Country-Led Initiative or CLI with the goal of solving the impasse of bringing the ban into forces. This culminated in a historic decision in 2011 at COP10 at Cartagena, Colombia, aided by the leadership of the nation to allow the ban to enter into force with 3/4 of the parties present and voting at the time of adoption, 1995. And almost 10 years later, in 2019, St. Kitts and Nevis, followed by Croatia, were the final two countries to complete that requisite number for entry into force. The ban amendment will become law on December 5, 2019.
For the additional measures and conclusion, Ms. Crystal Joy Faustino will discuss it to us.
Let's proceed to additional measures. First, there must be cooperation between countries to build up the capacity to tackle illegal traffic. United Nations, regional commissions, and other regional bodies or convention and protocols should take an effective part in monitoring and preventing this. Second, it is also important that custom officers and port authorities are adequately trained and able to take full control of the hazardous waste being moved across frontiers. Third, parties are to cooperate in helping developing countries minimize the generation of hazardous waste and their movement across frontiers. Measures can include ensuring that adequate disposal facilities are available, that managers are able to prevent pollution. And if pollution occurs, the consequences for human health and the environmental can be kept to a minimum. To sum up Basel Convention, we can say that Basel Convention is an effective international instrument. So, as a conclusion, Basel Convention lacks effective measures for enforcement for ensuring compliance, for sanctioning, or for signing liabilities. However, the Convention works actively with government and private entities in the form of partnership to minimize trade in waste. Non-state actors have played active role in moving negotiations forward. And lastly, the Convention has also invested heavily in generating awareness on the problem.